Good afternoon. I'm excited to take you guys through a demonstration of the Power Load system today. Power Load was a 7-year journey for Stryker, start to finish in terms of design, development, and ultimate launch. Power Load was designed to accomplish a couple of key initiatives. Number one, to increase the rear compartmental safety factor. You see, Power Load is a dynamically crash-tested cot retention system to over 22 G's of force, very representative of what could potentially be an MVA that you guys could become involved in during transport. How does that compare to the old side release bar antler system? Well, the old side release bar antler system, all it had to do was pass a 2,200 pound static pull force test, in no way representative of a moving collision that you could become involved in. Secondly, Power Load greatly reduces your exposure to lower back injury by raising and lowering, loading, unloading both cot and patient into and out of the medic unit. So with that being said, let's dive in, take a look at its functionality. Very similar to our Power Pro cot. Everything that is red activates or moves something. So when you arrive on scene, you open up your rear compartment, you're simply going to depress the red lever on the Power Load system and simultaneously pull back. Power Load is going to jog the cot up a couple of inches to compensate for patient sag weight. You'll pull it straight back until you get a set of green LEDs on the load system trolley. That is your indicator that you're now clear to lower the undercarriage down, which will be accomplished by simply depressing the plus button on your rear controls of the Power Pro cot. You'll hold the plus button down until the Power Load motor has stopped running and completely lowered the arms out of the way. Now at this point, the Power Pro cot is still being retained by the load system. There's one of two ways we can completely remove it or release it from Power Load. The first way is via a set of manual release handles up here at the head section. By lifting up on these handles, it releases the cot from Power Load. You'll also notice that our solid green LEDs went to a flashing amber, telling that it has completely released the cot. Now the second way, and probably most common way that you guys will use it on a call-to-call basis, is via the little third button on the rear controls of the cot. So right between the plus and minus is a little circular third button that when we depress it, it allows us to bring the cot away from the load system. So if we had just arrived on scene and we pulled our cot out of the back of the unit, removed it from Power Load, now you have the capability of raising your arms up, pushing the load system back in, securing the rear doors of the medic unit, and going retrieving the patient. When you arrive at the back of the unit with the patient, you'll simply open up your rear compartment, lift up your Power Load system arms, and pull the trolley back out until you get a set of amber LEDs flashing on the load system trolley. At this point, to load the Power Pro cot up, what you need to take a look at is just inside each load wheel, there is a locking pin. And these locking pins need to ride just above this little black shelf on each side of the load system trolley. So when you bring the cot up to the unit, you will take a look at those little locking pins, and if they're too low, we'll simply hit the plus button on the cot, raise the cot head section up, bring it up, and then we'll push it straight in. You'll notice that once it is locked inside the medic unit, our flashing amber LEDs go back to a solid green, telling us that it has secured the cot. Now, one possibility that you may experience is when you're going into the unit and you push it in, you may feel like you have locked it in place, but you still have a set of flashing amber LEDs on the load system trolley. And what that's telling you is the load system has secured one locking pin, but not the other locking pin. So what you're going to want to do at the foot of the cot, simply move it left to right until both pins lock into the load system trolley. You'll notice that my flashing amber LEDs went to solid green, indicating that we're now clear to raise the undercarriage up on the cot. That's going to be accomplished by simply depressing and holding the negative button on the Power Pro. Once the 4 main wheels fully retract and the motor stops running, we can go ahead and put the cot on into the medic unit. We will pull back to confirm that the cot is locked, shut our main doors to secure the rear compartment and make our transport to the ED. And that is normal operation of the power load system. So the next thing I would like to talk about is the manual backup systems on the power load unit. Should something not function properly, how do we navigate around that? The first thing I'd like to discuss is how the power load system functions. It would be natural to assume that the power load system is being powered via the truck. And in reality, it is not. It has a non-spillable lead-acid ATB battery on board the trolley unit, doing the raising and lowering of cot or patient. So it kind of begs the question, we've got a battery on the cot, we've got a battery on the load system. What does that look like when we have a power failure? Probably the most inopportune time to encounter a power failure would be when you're en route to a call, because you're going to have no idea that what you're about to attempt to use is not going to function properly. So what I'd like to do right now is I'm going to power the load system off to simulate a load system failure. And I'm going to do that by getting into the medic unit, and we'll press the power button on the side of the manual backup control panel, which we'll talk more about here in just a second. But let's just say we arrive on scene. We've opened the rear compartment of the medic unit. We go and we depress our red lever and simultaneously pull back, and nothing happens. That is our first indication that we have got a load system failure. The load system should have just powered that cot up a couple of inches to compensate for patient sag weight, and it did not do that. So all you're going to want to do is begin to think manually. Palms up, squeeze the manual release handle on the cot, and continue to walk back. The main wheels of the cot will descend down and make contact with the ground. At that point, you can release the manual release handle. But what you're going to notice is that the front wheels of the cot have made contact with the ground, but the rear wheels are still elevated. So what we're going to want to do is dump the hydraulic pressure in these power load lift arms. And that will be accomplished by depressing the manual dump button on the manual backup control panel. There's 4 buttons that comprise the manual backup control panel. One on the far left is the power button. That's how I turned it off to simulate this. We have an up arrow and a down arrow in the middle, which we'll talk more about those buttons in a minute. And then we've got a large manual dump button on the far right. When we depress that, which is what I'm going to do right now, you'll notice it sets the cot down, and while we're depressing it, we're just going to reach underneath and push the hydraulic arms out of the way. All it is doing is dumping the hydraulic pressure in the arms so I can set the cot down. At this point, we simply lift up on the manual release handles and bring the cot out. So if you think about it, it's as simple as this. The manual release handle on the cot, the manual dump button on the backup control panel, and the manual release handle on the trolley to remove the cot. Manual, manual, manual. All we're doing is thinking manually. At this point, we have the ability just to go once again and move our load system back into the medic unit, secure the rear doors, and go retrieve the patient. However, when we arrive at the back of the unit this time with the patient, we know that our load system has failed. So what we're going to do is simply move the load system trolley by lifting up the arms to the cab forward position where it will lock into place up there. You will bring the cot and patient up to the back of the unit, center the cot with the linear transfer of the power load. We will push it in and pull it back until the safety bar catches the safety hook. So all we've done is center the cot up with the load system, push it in, and pull it back until the safety bar catches the safety hook. At this point, a medic at the foot end will raise the foot end of the cot and squeeze the manual release handle, while a medic on the side raises the undercarriage of the cot. That is one option, is we could just continue to think manually and manually load the cot up. Or we could lift the cot up and depress the negative button, since there is no problem with the stretcher itself. We will push the cot in till it locks into place, pull back to confirm. That is how we load the cot manually if we encounter a load system failure. But we're not done yet. We shut our rear doors, we make the transport to the hospital. We arrive at the hospital, we open up the rear compartment. We depress our red lever to bring the cot out, and simultaneously we're going to pull back. But this time, being that we manually put the load system trolley in, it is no longer going to travel back with the cot. It's going to stay up there. So we need to be prepared to accept the full weight of cot and patient as we bring the cot out at this point. So we're going to go palms up on the lower grips, squeeze the manual release handle, and we're going to walk back with the stretcher. When the 4 main wheels make contact with the ground, we're going to set the cot down, release our handle, raise the safety bar up over the safety hook, and come on out. And that is how we would use the power load system should we encounter a load system failure. The worst case scenario is that load system just became a manual cot fastener. And for those of you who have been used to pushing in a side release bar each time to release the cot from the cot fastener, now all you're doing, being that the load system has failed, is simply depressing a red lever each time to release the cot. So the worst case scenario is the power load system just became a manual cot fastener. The next thing I'd like to talk about is a loss of power on the Power Pro cot. And to demonstrate a loss of power and how we would navigate around that, all I'm simply going to do is remove the cot battery. So I'm going to take the battery out, I'm going to set the battery aside, and we'll go back to our little scenario where we've just arrived on scene, opened our rear compartment doors, and we're going to remove the cot by depressing our red lever down, simultaneously pulling back. As far as we know right now, everything is functioning properly. We pull it straight back. We even get our green LEDs on the load system. But when we go to depress the plus button, nothing happens. That is our first indication that we have got a Power Pro cot failure, not a load system failure. So once again, we simply think manually. Manual release handle on the cot. Once the front main wheels make contact with the ground, we're going to move back around to the manual backup control panel. The only 2 buttons that we have not talked about thus far is the up arrow and down arrow. These arrows are for when we have got a cot failure, not a load system failure. I need to set the cot down right now, so I'm going to depress and hold the down arrow button, which will set the cot down for me, and it will also remove the power load arms away from the cot as well. Lift up on the manual release handle, come on out with the cot, push our load system back in to secure the medic unit, and we go and retrieve our patient. But this time when we arrive at the back of the unit with the patient, our load system is functioning just fine. It's our cot that has the problem. But being that the load system is functioning fine, it is actually going to help us load this cot and patient back into the medic unit. So all you want to do is lift up your load system arm, pull it back out until you get a set of amber flashing LEDs on it, the load system trolley telling you that it's ready to receive the cot. You'll bring the cot up to the unit, center it up, and push it right back in to the load system until you get your green LEDs. Now, our cot is not functioning properly, so the plus and minus button are not going to do anything. But our load system will do something to help us. The only button that we have not touched thus far is the up arrow button. We need to raise the cot up so we can load it up into the back of the medic unit. So what you're going to do is simply depress and hold the up arrow button. The power load arms are going to come up and raise the cot up for us. Now, being that we're sloped down, obviously the cot has a natural tendency of wanting to slide back into the medic unit. But what would happen is, you'd be palms up on these lower grips. We would squeeze the manual release handle while our partner on the side raises the undercarriage up and loads this cot and patient back into the medic unit for us. So the worst case scenario is with a battery system failure on the cot, power system failure on the cot, is our cot becomes a manual cot. Instead of raising and lowering it with a set of power buttons at the rear end, we're raising and lowering it via the manual release handle. If I had somebody here to demonstrate, we would load this back into the unit by squeezing the manual release handle. And I'm just going to pretend for a second that we had somebody on the side that manually raised it up for us. So we would raise it up. We would be squeezing our manually release handle. And what you'll want to do is continue to squeeze it until power load sets the cot back down. At this point, you can release the manual release handle, pull back to confirm, and make your transport to the hospital. So needless to say, it's manual, manual, manual once again. It's manual release handle at the foot of the cot once we've identified the cot failure. It's the manual up arrow and down arrow buttons that raise and lower the arms for us. And it's the manual release handle at the head end of the trolley that completely releases the cot from the trolley system. Very simple to navigate either type of failure, whether it be a load system failure or PowerPro cot failure. So just some final thoughts regarding what is powering the cot in the load system. We know that we've got a battery pack on the cot, we've got a battery pack on the load system. One of the beautiful things about the power load system is it has two inductive chargers. One at the rear for the cot battery, one at the head end for the load system battery. Anytime that the medic unit is hooked into shoreline or the ignition switch is on, it is pushing power to both inductive chargers, recharging both the load system and the cot. I hope this has been informative to you guys today. Thanks so much for your time.